Thank you for joining the latest episode of Skytale Insights. My name is James Turcott, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Michael Antosy, Director of Sales and Business Development at MyAdvice. Thanks for being here.
Hey, always a pleasure. How you doing?
Good, good. You are now the second person to be in our live studio, so excited to have you here.
I got to tell you guys, for anyone that's actually going to be coming on the pod, this is a great space. You guys done a really amazing job.
We appreciate it. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to put together and kind of see it all come to fruition. So, like I said, excited to be here live. Would love just a brief intro of yourself. MyAdvice, your background, how'd you get into aesthetics? All the above.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I kind of fell into the consulting space in aesthetics. I've actually been in this space for about 14 years. And so how I got into this, it's actually funny. Out of college, I had this job, and we've all had like those really like grinding jobs when you first get out of college. Sure. I ended up working for this company called Media Planet, and I don't even know if they're still around, but they have this whole circulation that they inserted special reports for like national newspapers. And I actually ended up on assignment with doing this cosmetic surgery report in Los Angeles. And so that was kind of like my first introduction into this space. I felt like I was kind of publishing articles that were a little bit more just consumer awareness in that space, what people needed to know, kind of peeking behind the curtain a little bit. And that's kind of what was my first introduction to aesthetics, which then got me into consulting with a company called MedNet Technologies back in 2010. MedNet was actually one of the first companies in this space to do like website development, SEO, started by two guys named Chris and Jack Pellman. And that ended up getting sold off to a company called MyAdvice, which is who I'm with right now, owned with Sean Mealy and Chad Erickson. And, throughout that time, I've presented a lot of different national meetings, the Aesthetic Show, AmSpa. I was just in 4S last weekend in Dallas. And so this is a great space. I mean, it's so exciting just because it's such a fast-paced industry that I think that we work in and the people that we serve, both in the aesthetics as well as dental spaces. So yeah, that's a little bit more about my background.
Love it. Yeah, that's fascinating. Just the path you've kind of taken to this point. And so, as we start to think about the space and aesthetics and marketing, and maybe touch on a little bit of MyAdvice, like what does the company do? How do you kind of go about, interactions with your clients? A little bit of background there.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, I would say on a very just simplistic point, we help practices grow new patient acquisition and revenue, specifically focusing with their online strategy. And there's many, many components to what we do. And we kind of have a very holistic system in terms of really how we really work with practice owners. But we've been around since 1998. Currently, right now, we serve over 2,500 practices throughout the United States in various capacities. We can, in the way our approach is really designed is we really can work with any type of practice just based around where they might be at in their business cycle. We have clients that we work with that are brand new into the industry with dentistry or aesthetics. They might not have necessarily a business plan. They don't know even how to execute. So often I hear from my practice owners, like, I didn't get into this space because I wanted to own a business. I really just wanted to take care of my people.
Sure.
To all those that are, multi-location and, might have really good KPIs and processes that have already been developed and really anywhere in between. But, regardless of that type of a client, James, is that there's always inefficiencies that we typically find with a digital strategy that is putting practice owners into positions where they have to spend more on their strategy to ultimately see a low return on their investment. And so that's really the problem that we want to solve. And more than that, it's really being a partner with them. It's kind of an analogy I might like to kind of compare us to. It's almost like if you go to the gym and you hire a personal trainer to help to get you bigger and quicker and faster and stronger. It's kind of the same reason why practices will partner with us as well too.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you guys have kind of understood what the different spectrum of kind of where a client lives and how you can kind of help. And so you introduced us to something really cool of how MyAdvice kind of treats patients, and you call it kind of the pyramid of success, right?
Yeah.
And we'll kind of talk through, I think, the different levels of it, but it starts, and I'll kind of list them off, and then would love to kind of touch on each and kind of get your thought on the approach
Sure.
essentially.
Yeah.
So, the bottom floor is website. Then you've got local search optimization. You've got Google reviews, then social media consistency, website content strategy, and then paid search at the top of the pyramid.
Right.
So, yeah, please elaborate.
Well, for those who are listening, let me just give you guys a little bit of story.
Yeah.
Maybe all this can kind of relate to. So, I actually happen to be taking peptides right now. So, I'm on this one peptide. If you're in the regenerative medicine space listening to this, it's called CJC 1295 with ipamorelin. And this is kind of like, it's like your feel good peptide, right? I'm going to be 40 next year, and I've got 2 boys at home, 3 and 9 months, and so energy could be a little bit better. As I'm aging, I'm like, I'm not getting as, I'm kind of losing some muscle definition. You look like you're a few years younger than me, so maybe you'll get there at one point. But anyway, so, I'm taking this to kind of, reinvigorate. They always say, you want to live for your kids. And that's kind of the whole thing that I'm doing about, extending longevity.
Love it.
Anyway, long story short, so I was talking to my doctor, and she was asking me a lot of my health history and my lifestyle. And I said, well, I don't smoke. I drink a little bit of glass of wine every once in a while, but nothing crazy. We cook all of our own food. I work out a lot. And she's like, all right, well, patients like you do really, really well because you have the right foundation that's there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really want to optimize the results of this peptide, you have to have the right foundation. Now, for those practice owners that might be listening to this, maybe I'm sure everyone's seen this type of patient where maybe they smoke and they drink and they party their face off, and they're really, really, they don't take care of themselves, and they're like, hey, make me make me feel better, make me look more beautiful. You're probably thinking to yourself, you're crazy. Like, you need the right foundation.
Yep.
And so that's kind of where a web strategy really works no differently either. When practices are really looking to optimize the results, or the returns rather, that they're getting from their web presences, a lot of lead flow, positive revenue that's been coming in, there's very much a framework and a way that we've defined that really can meet the practice with where they're at. And that's one of the things that we also fundamentally believe in as well, too. We're not a company that's going to oversell a client, but we really do want to be there to take care of them, to help them understand where their holes might be and how they can really be better positioned. And so you're absolutely right. Like, starting off with that ground level, like the website, websites are not dead, by the way. They are very much, very, very important assets for a strategy, because it really helps practice owners define their KPIs, understanding where leads are coming in from, patient engagement, behavior. You and I, we kind of talk about the same thing. It's like, if you really want to grow, you have to understand what your data is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so a website really does enable a practice to be able to do that very, very well. Now, beyond that, though, a website has to be beautiful. I was actually giving this story, doing this talk a few years ago, where this doctor came up to me, and he had a lot of moxie. He basically said that he was the best Botox injector in Calgary, and like, no one does injections better than him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, but he says, like, I have a problem. And I said, all right, well, talk to me. What's your problem? And he had said that, a few months ago, this practice had just come into town. They do not have the experience. They do not produce the results as good as what he does. But yet, like, he's noticed that ever since this new practice came into town, that his consults are down. He's not getting as much inquiries into his practice, and that's really freaking him out. So I looked at his website, and I told him right away, I'm like, I can tell you exactly what your problem is. He's like, well, you only spent like a second looking at it. How can you tell? I'm like, yeah, that's all the time that I needed.
Yeah.
And he said, well, what's my problem? And I had said to him, like, listen, you just got done telling me that you're the best injector in Calgary, that no one does, injections better than you. You have great results. He's like, yes, that's absolutely true. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but your website makes you look very, very mediocre. And you even have like one of those like tickers.
Yeah.
I can remember like the 90s where
Yeah.
it told you that you're the 9,000th visitor to the website.
Oh, no.
And I said, I'm like, when's the last time you've looked at this? And he's like, I don't know. I've never been on here before. It's been years.
Interesting.
And it's amazing, because as well credentialed as he was, as well experienced as he was, like, this other competing practice just had a great vibe to their site. It was beautiful imagery, great content. It was just a vibe that people wanted to engage with.
Yeah.
But beyond that, though, as much as this website has to be beautiful, it has to convert leads, it has to drive leads. And so what I'll always say is that if the website's not making your phone ring, then it's not doing the job for you in the way that it should.
Interesting. So you bring up this phrase that you've mentioned before, and I want you to expand on it. It's called, you called it digital equity. When you talk about kind of the piece
Mhm.
of kind of how I guess a brand is in the marketplace, or how the website, like, can you explain digital equity and what that means essentially?
Yeah, I mean, listen, your web presence, and I say web presence intentionally because it's not just the website.
Yeah.
It's so much that it's the visibility that you're doing to promote that site, everything from your citations to your reviews to your content strategies. But that's all really a holistic part of what really creates a well-ran sales funnel. And so when we say like your website is digital equity, that's exactly what it is because it's stock that you're putting into making your practice more visible. And so that has value for a practice,
Yeah.
especially if a practice is, in its, say mid-season or twilight years, and their doctors, practice owners might be thinking about, well, what are we going to be doing to sell? The website can contribute a ton of valuation to that next buyer.
Yep.
But with all that being said, though, it's actually really, really important that if there is maybe an exit strategy like that, that might be in the forecast, that the practice really is working with a company that knows how to do it. Unfortunately, it's so funny. Last year, I was actually talking to this one practice, and I'm not going to say names,
Yeah.
nor even say where they're at, but this practice was a powerhouse marketed practice. I mean, they put a lot of stock into their web presence, tons of great reviews, tons of great content. Really, really, really well ran digital strategy. And the doctor chose, actually, unfortunately, we did not end up working with this practice. He had gone to a competing company, which is totally fine, by the way. I mean, by the way, everyone has many, many options in this
A lot
world.
of fish in the sea.
Yeah, a lot of fish in the sea for sure. But I knew, I mean, and listen, I have a lot of respect for, even a lot of our competitors, but this is one that I knew. I'm like, listen, for how well this machine is running,
Yeah.
I think that you're kind of taking a step down with the choice that you're making.
Sure.
He's like, no, I'll be fine. I'm like, I don't think you're going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I actually ended up following up with him recently, and like right when the site launched, like he had lost over 70% of the traffic. And this is a doctor that is, again, more in the twilight season of his career. Like he's thinking about selling the practice.
Right.
And so that whole lead system that it took him years and years and years and years to build had just dropped like on a dime because of the processes that, the company that ultimately chose to go with really just wasn't really meeting the expectation.
And I mean, that's value, right? Like that's equity that is built into that website. And so I thought the phrase was so fascinating because people don't think of a website as monetarily valuable. They think of like their financials, right? When we talk to a client, it's like, hey, EBITDA is this, and this is what my company's worth. But there's a more granular level of the value behind that EBITDA and what's leading to that EBITDA. And I thought the concept was fantastic. And so,
oh, for sure. I mean, they've actually, I mean, you can even run some analytic data to understand like what is the trafficking value that your website is getting today.
expand on that.
Just based around a number of different analytic tools. And so there's tools that are on the marketplace that will actually really analyze trafficking patterns to a website based around a trove of analytics. I don't have time probably to go into them all right now, but, based around website content, what ad spend might be and things of that nature. But anyway, all those metrics kind of come together and you can start to get a valuation of what the traffic is into your practice's website as a result of that.
Interesting. Yeah. So, I know we spent a lot of time on the website, but as you mentioned, it's the foundation. It's
right.
It's kind of where you start.
Right. Exactly.
But, I think kind of moving up the chain, as people grow and expand and move up this pyramid, local search optimization. How do you kind of view that, maybe on a single site, multi-site? What are the different variables there?
Sure. Well, first, let's kind of define what local search optimization is. And by the way, there's so many terms that are on the market right now. You have SEO, you have content strategies, you have your local search optimization. I will just say, just for you and your listeners, everything that you do in the world of digital is SEO. It's not just relegated to, say, maybe some coding that might be on the website or some text on the site. It's really about who's being that loudest kid in the digital classroom.
Yeah.
And so when practices really want to evolve their internet presences to get more traffic, think about it almost as being like that annoying kid in class where the teacher would ask a question. And this is me in elementary school. I was like, oh, pick me, I have the answer. This is exactly what Google wants to see with your strategy. But when we talk about local search optimization, what we're really talking about is what we call near me searches. Okay. I mean, if I were to say, like, I'm just here for the second week in a row in Dallas, on my drive here, I was looking up, restaurant near me because I was a little bit hungry before I wanted to come in here to do this. When we talk about how we're number one, where revenue acquisition begins, it's Google.
Yep.
And this is actually a really funny thing because whenever I ask practice owners, and I see this a lot where people might be very, very heavily invested into social media, which by the way, it's a great thing, but I'll ask them the question if they're trying to grow their business. If I were just to move into your market and just say I was looking up, say, M-Sculpt, or if it was dental implants or what have you, where do I go to start that journey of discovery? And people always say, well, it's Google. I'm like, yeah, of course. It's what's driving your acquisition revenue. But within that Google infrastructure, half of all Google searches are localized. So that can either mean something, something, something in your city or town, or the more common vernacular is those near me searches. So that's really the first thing that a practice wants to optimize themselves for. With Google, with these local searches, it's all about distance, prominence, and relevance. Those are the three key ranking factors that Google wants to see.
Yeah.
When we talk about distance and relevance, though, what Google looks at is how consistent what we call the business's NAP data is. I know I'm getting a little bit nerdy here.
That's okay. We love data. We love it all here. Yeah.
Please stay with me, guys. This is fun. It's basically how your business's name, address, and phone number, NAP, is showing up among about 60 different local profiles as well as 15 apps. And so if there's variations with this data, maybe if a practice has moved office locations, or if they're multi-location, or if they have rebranded themselves, or if they have tracking phone numbers, all that stuff can really mess up how they're optimized for local search. And so that's always the first thing that you really want to optimize for because it's the lowest hanging fruit.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So it's funny. It leads right into the next rung of Google reviews.
Right. Totally. Exactly
and
right.
so, as you kind of mentioned, Google being the most important part, you've mentioned, there are intricacies within the Google reviews and how practices should go about utilizing it, optimizing it, to use your word. Talk a little bit about the Google reviews and why they're so important.
Yeah. So, this actually correlates a lot to local listings. I always say to practices, there's a lot of things that go well together in this world. If you're a fan of Friends, Ross and Rachel went well together.
Nice.
My kid loves peanut butter and jelly.
Butter and jelly and a Friends person.
Local listings and consistency with Google review building is also like a symbiotic localized Google strategy. Remember I said distance, prominence, as well as relevance. So when we get into the relevance aspect of things, this is really where a lot of the Google review strategy really comes into play. And a lot of people don't actually know this, but Google review building is about 20% of the search algorithm. So it takes up a huge chunk of the pie. Now, when we look at like a strategy specifically with Google reviews, number one, I think it's really important to understand that any practice that I talk to, any practice that's listening to this, your number one lead source should be word of mouth patients. Mm-hmm. If not, then you have a problem at your practice.
We just saw that with a metric, like a referral, someone that comes from a referral. I think it was like 60 to 70% of the time that patient is coming into the door if they get referred by a current patient.
Yeah.
And then it was like sub 50 or 40 if it's just via marketing tools or whatever.
Right.
The hit rate was so much higher.
Much higher. Yeah. And these are conversations that I have with practices all the time is they say to me, like, my best lead sources are my word of mouth patients, which is great. That means you're doing great work. But with all that being said, that doesn't mean that you still don't participate in business building strategies.
Sure.
And notice I didn't say the word marketing or advertising. Yeah. I'm talking about business building. Google review building is a part of building your practice. You have to be doing that regardless of how deep that well of referrals might be, because that is actually a strong correlator to how you then convert more word of mouth patients. We actually did a data study a few years ago, but what we have found is even for practices that are heavily reliant on the referrals, on average, patients will still look at 3 to 4 other alternatives before ultimately making that decision. So just
Wow.
because you have the referral doesn't mean that the door is always open.
Sure. Sure.
And what we have found is that Google reviews placate so much into converting that type of a lead source. And so when we look at that, what I'm always looking to see from just a practice level is how productive they are with their Google review strategy. It's one of those things that really, it's never a finished process. Like they always want to know that you don't reach a certain number of reviews and then you're done.
Sure.
Like it's always something you're constantly engaged with doing. So generally speaking, a practice should be generating a ratio of like 5 to 10% of new reviews on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis compared to how many patients that they might be seeing over that time.
Got it. So I think you've pointed out to me, offline here, but if you look at Google reviews and they have something or someone who hasn't posted in like 4 weeks, right? Like there's a inconsistency of how frequent you get that 5-star review. Then does it drop your score? Like how does that affect kind of the Google aspect of it?
Well, it's actually funny. So if a review is aged more than 30 days, it's technically considered to be a dead review. Dead in the fact that it's not really going to help you with your visibility. When reviews are aged at under 30 days, Google actually assigns a new tag to it. So even for the people that are looking at that review, that's Google's way of saying, hey, wink, wink, take a look at this. Like this is the review that you should be paying most attention to because it's the most recent.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it really, with a good review strategy, it really boils down to how well your rating is as well too. Practices should be at a 4.8 to a 4.9. We actually did a big data study a few years ago. We have some technology that was able to analyze over 3,000 aesthetics practices with their local listings as well as their reviews.
Wow.
Across the country. And what our data basically said was that if your practice is at a 4.3, then you're actually at the lowest 25th percentile of all practices nationally.
Which still isn't all that bad at 4.3
So
either.
unfortunately, we're not grading on we're grading on a curve here, though, right? So 4.3 out of 5 is actually an 87%.
Right.
Not too bad in terms of a ratio, but that's just not good enough in today's age.
Wow.
If a practice is that low, it's providing a ton of incentive to not go there.
Wow. Yeah.
So
that's a fascinating stat. I think we can cap that one off there. The next one, and as we go here, the word that keeps coming to mind is sophistication. Like as we move up this rung, it feels like you just get more and more sophisticated, more and more granular.
You get more granular, get much more specific.
Yeah. So social media consistency, and I feel like all these just kind of lead one into the other, just kind of like a maze, but you kind of lead right into it. And you mentioned social media consistency.
Yep.
So consistency, kind of the same theme as reviews and how you're kind of getting.
Same thing with citations as well too. It's like the name of the game really is consistency. If you want your web strategy to work well, you have to be consistent. I think that's with anything in life though, too, right?
Yep.
But what we have found with social media, it's absolutely a place, we have to start to look at these platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. These are search engines inherently. They're not maybe Google search engines, but these are certainly places that people are going to evaluate practices. There's people that will go and open up their Facebook feed and, just see what they see. Generally speaking, though, what we've found is that people that are converting from social media, it's not like I'm opening up my Instagram because, I know that I want to get this service done. I'm going to go check it out on Instagram. Typically, that's why we say Google is more oriented for intention.
Yep.
But yet practices definitely want to be consistent with how they're posting. That's really what these platforms reward. It's really about engagement. How good is the content? Are you getting a lot of clicks and likes and follows and shares?
Yep.
As well as how often are you actually posting to the platform?
Yeah.
And the reality is it's a full-time job. I mean, if you're not posting at minimum every other day, you're just simply not showing these platforms that you're a user of it.
Interesting. So social media is obviously a big player in the space with aesthetics. And so staying on that note, from a provider perspective, providers love to show their work, love to kind of advertise that piece. How do you manage that content? How does the, consistency of, do you post this provider or this provider? How do you kind of just maneuver, I guess, building the providers up within that consistency?
Puppies and babies. I said facetiously, but no. It's well, that is actually true. Like if you want some good,
Oh,
like a good
puppies.
engagement, like puppies and babies, it's always a for sure thing that is always going to get people to click. Yes, I love this.
Nice. I love it. I'll keep that in mind.
I will say like one of the biggest things that I see just in terms of not doing social media the right way is a lot of practices treat their social media like it's a sales tool. Special, 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 and
Yeah.
you could have a whole wall of like 30 specials and incentives. And that's definitely not it's not bad to do that from time to time, but what we have to understand as practice owners is that your patients don't like you because they want the special. They like you because they like you. They like your staff. They love the vibe of this
They're married to
practice.
the brand.
They're married to the brand. And again, going back to the digital equity piece as
Yep.
well, too, it's like, what are you doing to build stock online to ultimately increase the value of your practice? And so, listen, every practice is going to be different based on how they feel comfortable. And, I'll sometimes I speak with practice owners and they totally get it. And they say, listen, don't you dare touch my social media. This is me. This is my brand. No one knows it better than what I do. And if that's who you are as a listener, I totally applaud you. Like, keep that up because that is what really is going to help to drive your engagement. There's other folks that will say, this really intimidates me. I have no idea what to do. I know that my practice needs this, but my staff won't do it. I sure as heck can't do it. So I feel like I need some help. And if you are of that, then there's definitely companies that can really help you to complement your efforts.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. Like, everyone has what they're good at. Like everyone needs help in certain areas. It's not here's everything that you need and you need to go in this order. But there may be some things that you like. I know internally here at Skytale, like there's things that we do still as a growing company. I'm like, yeah, I love to do this, but I also have to do this. But we also should probably hire someone to help with that because it makes sense. Like if you're, what is your time worth at the end of the day and what do you like doing and like pushing on? And so, I think that's a great way to put it. Rounding out the top. So the next one is website content strategy, and then paid search is right above that.
Sure.
So expand a little.
Well, so now we're finally getting to the part. Well, let me just also say this before I talk about those two pieces. When you've done the website, when you have your listings dialed in, we have great reviews online, when you have good social media, that is a complete internet presence. And so if that's the goal of a practice, even if they're very, very well established, I mean, I've talked to practice owners and they say, like, listen, I don't necessarily need more, but I know that this aspect of my practice needs a lot of improvement. That's generally speaking all that they might need.
Sure.
Okay. But if the practice is really trying to grow faster and quicker and more acceleratedly, then do you start to layer in SEO, which everyone knows this. I actually prefer to more precisely define it as content strategies because that's really what SEO is. It's backlinking. It is dedicated pages for every single service that you have at your practice on your website. Actually, I don't know, James, I'll ask you this question. Yeah. Google actually has a favorite website, and I'll give you a hint. It's not a social media site, nor is it a shopping site.
Microsoft.
Nope.
Apple?
Nope. It's Wikipedia.
Oh, interesting. Just because of the amount of the amount of info?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Google any topic that you might be interested in. Any listener that might be listening, just Google it. I will, and this is the only time I'll say this word, I will guarantee you that you will find that subject's Wikipedia listing somewhere within the first 10 listings of Google.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And it's because what Wikipedia is just a huge information source. There's new content articles that are being added to it every single day. And so, especially when a practice is really trying to deepen and get more granular with their strategy, that's really where their content strategies are really going to come into play. And so, mimicking, the questions that patients might be asking you in your room, are you answering those questions on your website? Do you have maybe a YouTube video that you're embedding onto that page By the way, YouTube is the world's second biggest search engine behind Google, also owned by Google.
I
And
love all
so
these stats.
I know. So it's just like, I didn't grow up a stat guy, by the way, but I just
I
happen to
love
know these
them.
things.
Yeah.
But, all of these things are pieces of really what SEO is. The one thing I will say, generally where I find practice owners will fail with their SEO though, is they are just simply not in a collaborative relationship with the folks that are doing their SEO.
Sure.
Um, one of the questions I might ask is, how often do you talk to your company that's doing your SEO, your content strategies? And if they say never, then that's definitely not a recipe for that consistency factor that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I laugh because paid search is at the top. And it's funny because everyone that I know, our clients that we talked, it's like, I'm paying for marketing. What am I getting?
Right.
Like, I'm paying all this money. What's coming back? And I find it interesting that it's at the top because it's the last one, but everyone thinks about it first. Like, here's Facebook ads, here's Google ads, whatever it is. How do you kind of track that ROI? And I guess I'll back up. Why is it at the top? Like, why is it the last one up there?
Well, let me just say, a lot of these things you can do in sequence.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not as if you have to wait like 2 years before you start to do
Yep.
ads. But the important thing to understand is that you want to be well positioned to capitalize on the ad.
Great point. Yeah.
For example, if your practice is just getting started, sure, you might be doing some ads, but and you might get the clicks or the exposure from the ad, but yet you don't have like any reviews online, or maybe your social media isn't even really there. So yeah, you might get that click, you might get that exposure, but is it really resulting into that lead that's coming in? Is that lead then converting into a patient?
Yep.
And so every practice is going to be a little bit different on a case-by-case basis. But the important thing to understand is that if you're going to be aggressive out of the gate, you just cannot ignore the foundation.
Yep. Oh, love it. Yeah. Foundation is key.
Right. It's about really putting you into the position to be successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'll see if you remembered. I'm sure you do, but you told me a number from a long lifetime value of a client.
Yeah.
And why it's so important. And I'd love for you to share that because
Sure.
it's a massive number.
Yeah. Well, and to be honest with you, this whole pyramid that we were talking about,
Yeah.
this whole framework that we've been discussing, it's all about really capitalizing on
Absolutely.
that lifetime value. It's interesting. Like when I talk to practice owners, like one of the first questions that I always ask is, how's the business state of your practice doing? And the answers that I hear always sound the same. It's always, last month was our best month ever. Last quarter was our best quarter ever. I heard a lot of that actually since the pandemic, especially in aesthetic medicine.
Yeah.
For some folks, like business had never been better. But what they're doing is they're really looking at their patients as transactions, cumulative transactions. And you add up all those transactions over time, and then that equals revenue. And you often equate, what did we spend to get that revenue? And it's kind of a historical relationship. And that's definitely one way of being able to measure the success of your marketing, but it's a very shallow perspective because what its true value is, it's about producing predictable revenue pipeline. Much like how you might have an investment portfolio. What are the things that you're putting into the coffers today that are paying you 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line? And that's really what we've talked about with patient lifetime value. So in aesthetics, for an average aesthetics practice, talking about folks that might be doing, also body contouring, laser treatments, a national average is one patient is worth $57,000.
Over how long?
Over a 15-year life cycle.
Wow.
So, it's interesting kind of going back to that question, if I ask how's the business state of your practice doing, no one ever says to me, well, gosh, the $1,000 I invested into my marketing today has produced, say, $57,000 of future valuation or $114,000 of future valuation. And by the way, that number also does not account for the referrals that patient is going to also yield into your practice. Sure. And so when you really start to even think about that, I mean, gosh, the valuation can be, it's massive.
Yeah.
That 57 is really just a starting point.
Right. Yeah. I thought that was amazing. And we're numbers people here, right? Like we look at financials all the time and people look at the now and the present and how the business is doing. But if you're looking at, and this gets thrown out a lot, and I feel like I say it on every episode, but patient retention and why patient retention is so massive. And that number just reiterates the fact of if you can keep them for that long, that's just a starting point, not only from what they're worth, but what they refer into. And any patient they refer, there's another 57,000, 50,
Totally.
and so it's just the number blew me away.
Which is why we have to build a lot of that digital equity, And, the other thing too, I mean, you have to understand that you have to put the time in, you have to put the investment into. I mean, there are certainly some strategies that will have a quicker return, but, when you get into this, you definitely want to see this as playing this through the long game. We're playing all 18 holes here.
Yeah. Well, I'm a golfer.
Yeah.
Love that reference. And so as the space grows, and we mentioned the word sophistication, and as these practices get going and they turn into multi-site, and they just continue down that growth path, as you've seen the space evolve in that sophistication, people grow quickly, it feels like. And as they grow, what are kind of the misses or the blind spots that you kind of see as these practices go from 1 to 2 to 3, however large? There's got to be stuff that they miss along the way. And I'm curious if you see any of that.
Gosh, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I feel like, one of the most common things, again, is just missing the foundation. It's thinking that they can buy their way to the top. And, the less fortified a strong digital foundation is, it's going to put practice owners into positions where they just have to be spending more to see less back. Again, another data study point, going back to that case study that we did a few years ago, what we had found is only 1 in 10 aesthetics practices nationally is doing something about their local listings.
Wow.
Which is the first thing that you should ever do.
Right. Community.
It's community. Yeah. And no one is doing it. So if you're a practice listening to this, look at your 10 competitors. 9 out of 10 are not doing the most foundational thing.
Wow.
So especially as a practice might scale from, say, like 1 location to 5 locations to 10 locations, they want to make sure that they're really maintaining and fortifying that local presence. Mm-hmm. And that's where things like, again, building out reviews onto that location is going to be really, really important. Yep. Fortifying that local search near me optimization. The website as a whole then can kind of globally govern, all of those locations and really help you to kind of be like that Wikipedia of aesthetic medicine in your market, if you will. But you still want to kind of compound that with more of a localized focus.
All roads lead to the website.
Yeah. Well, it's also too just making sure that even though as you grow and you scale, you don't lose sight of what's really going to be some of the best marketing tools to convert your best revenue.
Sure.
It's not just about throwing a lot of money at the thing. It's about making sure that what are we building for this that are going to attract the right types of people, regardless of how big we get.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And it's funny. It's not even just marketing. Even when you say throw money at it, when these practices get going, it's the devices that people think like, oh, shiny device, and I'm going to buy it. And you may not get the return because you didn't market it the right way.
Totally.
Or you didn't get those people through the door from a lead perspective. And so, those go hand in hand. And now you've just compounded the issue of even more from a spend perspective.
It's amazing. I'll talk to practice owners and they'll say, I'm not going to do marketing because I just spent $110,000 on this device. I'm like, how are you going to...
Crazy.
How are we going to bring them in then?
Yeah. No, all of these things, one, loved all the points from a data perspective, what you're seeing in the marketplace. I think they're super helpful for our listeners. And no, I found them fascinating. I'm an analyst by nature. So from a marketing perspective, not where my strong suit lies. So we love having you here.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that's the way that we look at the world as well, too. I mean, actually, have you ever read the book, Measure What Matters?
I haven't. Oh, I have.
James Dorr.
I have.
Yeah. It's all about OKRs and, measuring, taking the things that you can measure at your practice and then, or looking at your production, how can you measure that? And then how can you get better from that? I mean, that's a quality that actually governs everything that we do here at MyAdvice. And that's kind of the same mindset that we take when we really apply that knowledge to helping our practices grow as well, too.
Love it. Well, can't thank you enough for coming in. Before we go, how should people get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Yeah. Just go to myadvice.com. You can check us out there. I'll actually leave my information in the show notes as well, too. So if anyone would like to touch base, please feel free to reach out to me.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this episode. We appreciate it.
Enjoyed the time. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care, everyone.